So today's lesson is lesson number 3, and it's percent applications. It's essentially just taking what we've already learned and applying it to word problems. So we can either use one of our two strategies, either the proportion or the mental math, that breakdown that we kind of talked about. But to start today, you guys have that review right at the top of your notes to identify the part, the whole, and the percent. So go ahead and pause the video and then answer these on your own before coming back and watching. So you should have this chart done by now. And if we go through these problems together, we have to identify which is the part, which is the whole, and which is the percent. One of those pieces of information will be missing. So there are 130 kids in Quest. 32% of Questonians are boys. How many are boys? So we have 130, and we have 32%. Clearly 32 is our percent. 130 kids in Quest, that is all of your kids. So that would be your whole. We have to figure out what part or how many are boys. The next one says there are 8 kids who play piano. 48 kids play an instrument. What percent play the piano? We have 8 and we have 48. 8 is the part that play piano. 48 are all of the kids that play instruments. We need to figure out what is the percent that play piano. And last there are 45 dogs at the dog park. This is 98% of the animals in the park. How many animals are in the park? 98 is clearly my percent. And then I have to think 45 dogs and how many animals? Well, how many animals would be a total animals? So that's our missing piece. And 45 of those total animals are dogs. So before we start working on these word problems, we're going to go over our 2 different strategies of solving. Our first strategy that works every single time is a proportion. So we have a proportion. Remember, proportions are when we have that fraction equaling a fraction. And in that fraction, we do the part over whole equals the percent over 100. The nice thing about the proportion is it doesn't matter which piece is missing, but it's going to work every single time. The second option we have is a breakdown method. This only works if you're given the whole. If you are trying to find the whole, it will not work. So this only works sometimes. So it's a good option, but it's not always the best option. It's my preference though, if possible. And remember, that's if we're given a number. So let's say we have the number 80. We like to break it down and figure out what is 10% of 80. And remember that in order to do so, all we do is we take our decimal, we move it 1 to the left. 10% of 80 is 8. We can also use that to find 5%, because we know 5% would be half of 10%. So we can take half of 8, and we know 5% of 80 would be 4. If we know 10% and 5%, we can find anything. We could find 40% hypothetically. If I wanted 40%, I know that's 10% times 4, so it would be 8 times 4, which is 32. So if we know 2 pieces, we can find basically anything. So when we look at our first problem today, we can use either method, and it's going to get us the right solution. It says Dave scored a 70% on his math test. Dave got 28 problems correct. How many problems were on the test? So we always want to figure out first, when looking at the numbers we're given, and when we're looking at the question we're trying to answer, what is the part, what is the whole, what is the percent? I know 70 is clearly my percent. And then I have 28 problems correct. How many were on the test? When we think about the whole, we can think about the total. So that total problems on the test is what we're trying to find, which means 28 is the problems correct. The other thing we want to make sure is that the reasoning for the part matches the reasoning for the percent. So he got 28 problems correct, which was 70% correct on the test. Those two reasonings have to match. If they do not match, you need to find different numbers to use. The part and the percent need to have the same reasoning behind them. Now, notice we're missing the whole. Because we are missing the whole, we cannot use the breakdown method because you always start with the whole, which we are unsure about. So we're going to have to use the proportion to solve this problem. So to set up my proportion, I would do 28 over x equals 70 over 100. We would then cross multiply, and so I would have 28 times 100 equals 70 times x. And then this is no calculator, so we're going to have to think about this. We would have 2,800 equals 70x. I know I divide by 70 on both sides. And then we can actually do a little math to make this simpler. We would technically divide these by 10, so we can cancel 0. So we're really taking 280 divided by 7 is the problem we're left with. I know 7 goes into 28 4 times, and then we have a 0 left over. So it's 40. So how many problems are on the test? 40 questions. Please make sure that you are labeling your answers because these are word problems, so all of our answers need a label. Our next problem says that at Kohl's, a pair of shoes is $60. They are on sale for 30% off. How much is the discount? So we have $60, 30% off, and how much is the discount? So when we identify the part, the whole, and the percent, remember I said the reasoning for the part and the reasoning for the percent need to be the same. So the pair of shoes is $60. That was the original cost. Whenever we think of whole, we can think of original as well. That's another key word, original, total, whole, all go together. And they're on sale for 30% off. Well, that's clearly not the part, that's the percent. So my percent is 30% off. Notice my reasoning is the percent off. So when I'm thinking about my part, it's how many dollars off. So that part is going to be how much money I'm getting off or the discount. It's not going to be the new price yet. So keeping that in mind is really important. Here we could either use the breakdown method or we could use the proportion. Because I just did the proportion in the last example, we're going to use the breakdown. So we start with the whole, which is 60. And if I need to find 30%, I know if I have 10%, which is 6, I can use it to find 30%. So if I have 10%, I know 10 times 3 is 30, so 6 times 3 is 18. 30% is $18. So how much is the discount? $18 off. But the next half of that question says, how much is the sale price? So to figure out that sale price, we're going to have to take the original cost minus our savings to find that sale price. So they were $60. We are going to take $18 off, and we're left with shoes that are $42 on sale. So how much do the shoes cost now? $42. And for this problem, we use that breakdown strategy. And we could do that because we knew the whole this time. If we don't know the whole, we can't use the breakdown. And finally, on Fortnite, I have won 50 games. If I win 30% more games, how many games will I have won total? So we have 50 and we have 30%. How many games will I have won total? So thinking about the part, the whole, the percent. I have currently won 50 games. That is my current total. I'm working on 30% more. So my part is going to be how many games more do I win? Notice my reasoning for the part and my reasoning for the percent, they have to match. So I could use the breakdown method or I can use the proportion. Completely up to you. I'm going to use the breakdown. So if I start with the whole, which is 50, if I find 10%, we move that decimal over 1, which is 5. Once I know 10%, I can easily figure out 30% because 10 times 3 would be 30. So 5 times 3 is that part, or 15. So 15 more. But it's asking how many games have I won total? I had 50 wins. I get 15 more wins. And I'm going to have to add those together. So how many I start with, how many more I get, and all together I'll have 65 wins.